Welcome to the 7th video on choosing a mantel that will fit your fireplace. This is presented to you by Hearthco. It's a video training session and we hope you enjoy it. This video is about choosing the right product for your intended application. It's going to teach you how to know what it is that you need to measure. It will it will also help you understand if you have a normal installation or if you have specific design limitations. This is just a reminder, Hearthco's been the industry leader for over 20 years. What you're looking at here is a spec sheet. This happens to be a picture of a little Dublin, the very first design that Hearthco ever came up with, way back in 1990. And we've sold literally hundreds of thousands of Dublins. Comes in a lot of different sizes, and each one will fit a certain situation. And this is going to help you decide whether or not a normal sized mantle and surround is going to work for you. So you're going to look at the spec sheet for whatever design you're looking at. On the website, the second image is always a line drawing or a spec sheet, and below it there's a table. The table shows that there are different sizes. So as an example, if you looked at the Dublin 3-38, you could see that the A dimension is 38 inches. So that's the distance between the legs. Notice that they're all named for that A dimension, since it's the single most important dimension. We're going to talk a lot about the A dimension, the distance between the legs, because you don't want to do an installation where the legs cover up part of the opening. That's what this is all going to be about. So, to begin with, there are only two questions that you have to find out the answer to know what surround will and will not work in your situation. The first one is an open wall. By an open wall, I mean, is there anything interfering? Was it built on a little pop-out wall that has a limit on how wide it can be? Is there a bookcase there? Maybe there's a corner of it's in the corner of a room and you can only have a certain amount of clearance. Note that if you have limited clearance on one side, it doesn't matter if the other side has 15 feet. You can't center the surround off center. You can't slide it to the side where you have more space. So the limit on either side is going to dictate the total length that you're going to be able to use for your top piece, which is called the mantle or the cap. Now here is a picture. This happens to be a Cassano, very nice model, and it shows on a little raised hearth on an open wall. And so what do I mean by an open wall? Well, simply this. If this firebox had been 50% larger, it still would have fit on the wall. Now, it's not to say that you could have used the Cassano, because the Cassano might not have been large enough, but the point is there are no wall restrictions. And you're going to find about 80% of all installations are done on open walls, where the fireplace is in the center of the room. There's nothing to limit how long the top can be. This is all about the cap length. You can't have a short cap and a wide opening. Those two don't go together. You're going to see that relationship as we go along. And it isn't going to matter if it's a fixed length cap or whether the cap can be made to custom length. There's still a relationship between those legs and the top of the cap. The mantle has to be long enough to allow for, on a traditional design, for the taper to come down and then for the legs to drop down, and you still have to have clearance for the firebox. So we'll notice as we go along a little bit more about this. So here's a picture with no limitations. Now here's another Cassano, same model, that's installed on a wall that has limitations. If you look closely, you'll see that this wall pops out. It is not a straight, long, continuous wall. This was a built-out chase for the firebox, and if this Cassano had been 6 inches longer, it would not have fit on the wall. So if the firebox had been slightly larger and you needed a mantel that was slightly larger, you would run out of wall. Take a look at it and see that you can see what I'm talking about. This top could not be more than, looks like you have about 2 inches on each side longer. That would mean that the legs could be no more than another inch or so apart, um, and be able to uh, fit within that wall. So this is a limited dimension. Now, here's someone else who had a limited dimension, but they were very creative. This is a picture of a Castella, which is now the Goleta series. And someone did a very creative solution here. Notice that the Goleta would never have fit on this wall. This firebox is too big for the little pop-out wall. And yet they wanted a big, impressive mantle and surround, and you notice the legs stick out further than the wall. So what they did was to wrap this surround around that pop-out wall. So the surround actually extends back, and that gave them the extra width they needed to make room for those legs. Now, to do that, it takes a talented installer. On the front, you can see you have a full mantle surround. You have the filler, and they used a real nice bullnose flat stock filler, which I think is very attractive. And then you have to buy a second mantle, a second cap. And that was cut into two pieces. And one half was used on the left side and one half was used on the right side to extend that back to the wall. And so this is a really nice installation done by a talented installer, and it's a great solution when you have a limited dimension. So we're going to have a full video just on solutions for limited dimensions, and to show you all the different solutions that you have. There's virtually no situation where there isn't something that Hearthco makes that can be used for a mantle or a surround, at least a mantle, and usually some type of a surround, assuming there are any side walls at all. So the first question then, do you have an open wall? All right, we've established that we do or do not have an open wall. We know where to go from there. So what's the second question? And this is common to all installations. It simply doesn't matter how long your wall is or anything else. You must know the width of the opening of the firebox. It's like framing a picture. The frame has to be bigger than the picture. As long as the frame is bigger than the picture, you can trim around the inside with matting to fill in down to the size of the picture. But if the picture's bigger than the frame, it's going to stick out the edges of the frame, and of course that won't work. Well, we don't use matting, but we use a product that we call flat stock, and the industry calls it filler. We don't like to limit it by calling it filler because it's used for a lot of other purposes. You're going to see it used for risers on raised hearths, to make overmantels, to make wall sections, outside trim. There's a lot of things that flat stock can be used for. Think of it in terms of a sheet of plywood, only not made out of wood. It's made out of the same material that your mantle and surround are made out of. So it can be used to fill in all kinds of situations. So here's a picture of a Hermosa, and not a very good drawing of a firebox there in the middle. One's in perspective and one is straight on, but you get the picture. This will work. You can see that you can trim around the inside of that firebox with matting, and it's going to look totally built in, and that's going to work. Now here's a picture of one that won't work. Someone takes the Hermosa and they try to put it over a firebox, which is wider than the opening. Now, of course, it would cover up part of the opening. I put the firebox in the front to show you that there would be an overlap, and you can't have that. It's very important that you don't have the legs overlap the opening. Now you can get away with it with an electric, maybe a tiny bit of overlap on a gas, but on a wood burning you certainly don't want to. And here's why. Smoke or fumes from anything that is burning can get behind the legs. If the legs hang over the opening, even though you caulk around that area behind it and you're real careful to seal that, over time that can fail. And then you have fumes that get behind the mantle and the surround. Now the mantle and the surround are hollow, so that area then fills up with smoke or fumes. And again, they're caulked to the wall, but that caulking over time fails, and pretty soon you have smoke or fumes leaching out into the room. So this is something that I almost never um, recommend anyone does, and that is to have the mantle and surround limit the width of the viewing area. Again, if it's an electric, maybe a little bit would be okay. If you want to take that responsibility and seal behind it really well, I'll leave that up to you. It's not a design that I favor. If your uncoverable area is wider than 43 inches, you need to realize about 80% of the Hearthco designs are not going to be for you. You're going to want to look at all of the different ones that could be ordered in custom lengths. And we'll get into that more when we look at the, uh, the videos on the custom lengths and how they work. And when we get into special situations, we'll be talking about all the different things that you can do. But for many years, the widest fireboxes were 42 inches. And so for the first 15 years, Hearthco did not make an opening wider than 43 inches. So a lot of our traditional designs that go back that far, you'll see that the A dimension, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking at the A dimension on that spec sheet. How wide is that? So if it says 43 inches, you can know that that was designed for a 42-inch firebox. Now it can be used on a 36 or a 33 because you're just going to have more flat stock filler around it, but it can't be used on a 47. You get into something larger than 43, you're going to eliminate an awful lot of designs in the traditional line. Most of the Metroscapes, contemporaries, are designed for the linears, and you're going to find they're going to work okay, and then the custom links will all work okay. We'll always have an answer for you. It just may not be in the simplest of our choices. I mentioned flat stock filler. So this is what it looks like. This is a spec sheet. It is 1 inch thick. It's 48 inches long or 72 inches long, and it comes in 6, 12, 18, and 24-inch widths. When you do your design, you want to make sure that you don't try to get more than 2 cuts out of a single sheet. The difference in the price of 2 6-inch and 1 12-inch is only $1. You don't save any money by buying bigger sheets and trying to get lots of cuts out of them. But what you do get is pieces that don't have a factory edge. So if you have a 6-inch piece and you cut 2.5-inch pieces out of it, each piece has a factory edge. But if you buy a 12-inch piece and you cut 4 cuts out of it that are all 2.5 inches, 2 of those don't have a factory edge. And no matter how good you cut it, it doesn't have that same nice look that the factory edge does. So when you think of your filler, think in terms of 2 pieces out of 1 piece of filler and then 2 cuts out of another piece of filler. Okay, so this to wrap it up. Remember, it's like framing a picture. As long as the frame's bigger than the picture, it's going to work. So let's not cover up any of the opening of the firebox. Let's make sure that we have clearance. Maybe there's some hinges for the doors that need to be considered. Maybe there's vents on the side. Maybe there's just some decorative iron or some stainless steel tubing that runs up the side. Anything that you don't want to cover up, That's what you need to measure. You need to measure the width. The reason that the height is not usually a problem is the legs can be cut to length to get whatever height you want. And there are things called extended plinth blocks to raise it up. So we can raise and lower the height. I'm not so worried about the height. What I'm worried about is the width of the opening of the firebox, the width of whatever is uncoverable. Thanks for watching.